morning, everybody, and welcome to TLC Live. I'm Andrea Gomez here in Houston, and
Orlando Sanchez up in the Rocky Mountains just for another day.
just for another day. Well, today is June 21st, supposedly, officially the first day of summer, but here in Houston, it's been crazy. I bet you that over there you're having it better.
Well, it was 37 degrees last night, and it's going to be the high 62 today. So I know I can hardly wait to get back to 106 degrees the rest of the week. But
Yeah,
anyway, we have an
it's
exciting show today, and we have a couple of guests. The first one I'm going to introduce because he's a dear friend of mine whom I've known for a very long time. Many of you will remember him. He just ran in a election in the primaries as the Republican seeking the nomination for the position of Harris County judge. He came out a big short. I was a big supporter of Vidal Martinez because I thought that he could have won countywide. But unfortunately, it wasn't meant to be. But Vidal is an old friend that I met back in the early 90s. He's been the former U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of Texas. He's been the state chairman of the Bar Association of Texas. He's been a port commissioner. He is the longest serving member of the Methodist hospital system here in Houston. And he's been a regent of the University of Houston. And I think I'm forgetting one other thing. I know he'll tell us about it. Dal, did I cover all the bases? And welcome to the program.
You covered enough.
well, he has a long,
Morning.
long resume.
Good morning.
Yeah, very long. Good morning. Listen, I wanted to bring you in because there's a lot of things going on up in Washington, D.C. First of all, I want to hear your perspective as the former U.S. Attorney here in Texas of the Trump 39 count indictment, I believe, 37 or 39 counts.
37.
Is this politics or is this could it have been resolved by the attorneys for the Trump family or Donald Trump working with the U.S. attorney solve this rather than sending the FBI in, raiding his house, and then charging him?
First, I'm an assistant United States attorney, a federal prosecutor in the back. If you said U.S. attorney, I was not the U.S. attorney. So I was one of
Gotcha.
the 22 assistant prosecutors in the office. But yes, to answer your question directly, of course it's politics. This is something that got was a technical violation. There's three parts to these 37 count indictment. There's the retaining of classified documents, of which there were over 300, as it turns out. The second part, though, is the more problematic. It's obstruction of justice and making false statements. So this is sort of like running a red light, and that's the technical violation with retaining classified documents. It could have been settled early, but then the government alleges two more things happen, and these are serious felonies at that point. This is the obstruction of, it's like running the red light, but you then caused an accident, and then you tried to cover up the accident. It's usually the cover up or the subsequent actions that do that. And my view is that's the most perilous conduct that the president has to defend at this point. Now, fortunately, if you'd have gotten to pick a jurisdiction to be in, you would pick the Southern District of Florida to be in. It's a red state now. In Dade County, Governor DeSantis and Senator Rubio and Congressman Ballard won handedly by a substantial margin. It's now a county that you can claim that most of the Republicans statewide won, and so you're in a pretty good venue right now. Plus, Donald Trump is their neighbor, so it's not like going to Chicago or San Francisco to try this case. He's in a pretty favorable jurisdiction, and he has a very straight, famous judge in Aileen Cannon down there. She's a former federal prosecutor also. She's straight. If you look at her background, she's Cuban descent. She's got a great story, family escaped to Colombia and then came to the United States. She was appointed by Trump. So if you're going to talk about the forums that you want to pick to have a jury decide whether these parking tickets should be handled or whether the obstruction of justice and the false statements should dominate the response by the jury, I think that he's in a he's in the fight of his political life on legal charges right here. There's never been as serious legal charges as have been filed here. In the federal government, there's three overriding statutes. That one of them is perjury, one of them is conspiracy, and the other one is obstruction of justice. And they've got him on two of the three, and those are serious charges that he's going to have to deal with.
Two questions come to mind. Number one, let's just assume that this now is playing out. Even if there is an acquittal or a conviction, either the government may appeal or the Trump lawyers may appeal. This is going to take a long time, correct?
Yes, and although Judge Cannon set a trial date for August, she set the beginning for preliminary motions in August. This is going to take to the end of the year, and I doubt that there's going to be a jury trial that we see in 2023. Then it'll be appealed. Trump likely will never settle this case, even on running the red light, the parking ticket issues. He can't. So he's going to take it all the way to a jury, and then he has the opportunity to appeal. During that time, even if he was convicted, he could still run for president of the United States and win. So it's going to be an interesting year next year. But these charges are an unnecessary weight around his neck right now. And sure, they were political. Look what happened with Hunter Biden yesterday. And look what's happened today with the testimony before the House committee on the FBI and the politicization of the FBI in the Russia hoax. So, yeah, it's happening, and we've never seen this with the FBI and the Department of Justice before.
Not only have we not seen this, but here's the other thing, Vidal, and now we're going to get off into some opinions. This is unprecedented, certainly in my lifetime in public office. I mean, I've seen charges of corruption, and we've got our own issues here in Texas. But I think there's a civil war going on Capitol Hill. And correct me if I'm wrong, but this all started, in my opinion, when Bork was up for the Supreme Court. And remember how they treated him and they borked him. I mean, he was qualified to be on the Supreme Court, but the Democrats, and I think Joe Biden chaired the Judiciary Committee at the time, derailed him. And then it was, they just kept coming. Then there was Clarence Thomas, and then the whole Anita Hill, and then there was the Republicans impeached Donald Trump, and then I'm sorry, Bill Clinton, and it seems to be escalating. Now they've come after Trump. Now allegedly, they seem to be looking at Biden's son. Also, Pence and Biden both had documents. I understand that they claimed that, once they were notified they had them, that they turned them over quickly and cooperated. But is there a civil war going on in Washington, D.C.?
There is a civil war going on, and you have seen, you're going to just watch the news cycle today on the politicization of the FBI. In the past, that would have never happened. Okay. You had strong hands-off indication with the FBI. They could conduct their investigations. The Department of Justice was not politicized the way it is today. In the Biden and Obama and Pence situations, there is a clear difference on how they handled it, though. First of all, Biden and Pence both immediately, their lawyers just turned over everything. They didn't have to be subpoenaed or have the FBI come pick them up. And so that was a long way towards, you got to have intent to commit these conspiracy or obstruction of justice. And in this case, unfortunately, the president was making statements about showing some of these documents orally and recorded. And he also was instructing his lawyers to hide documents Well, those lawyers had their attorney-client privilege waived, and they testified before the grand jury. Those are critical differences in the handling of what I consider to be like the speeding ticket or running the red light that started all this. They handle it properly. It's over for both of them. They both got no further action letters by the Department of Justice. So, there is a difference. But you go back to, they're just going to. I believe that he's going to be indicted. President will be indicted in Georgia also. It's 1,000 cuts here. The New York prosecutions, the New York lawsuits, this one in Florida, the one that's coming probably in Georgia. But at the end of the day, he gets to run for president, and it seems to be emboldening his campaign and his fundraising efforts as we go along. And the reason is not so much because the country is in love with the president, but they like what he did and they think that he's a victim. And there's a lot to be said about that. You can point to a lot of different facts and circumstances that give him the right to make that argument.
And that was I was gonna ask you that, Vidal, that what it that means for the public in general, for the taxpayers, for people that don't understand very well what is going on in politics. So is this a lot of publicity for him that is going to be in a positive way for his campaign, and he's still running for president regardless, no matter what, if he's going in this indictment this year and next year? So what does that mean for the taxpayer, for the people that are going to go and vote? What do we need to do? What do we need to know about this?
Well, you can count on one hand the number of people that have 100% name ID in the country. Every taxpayer knows who Donald Trump is. And of those in the Republican Party, over 50%, over half of those are supporting him for president. So for the average taxpayer who's a Republican, you already know Donald Trump. You see this coming. Without this storm of prosecutions, who knows where he would have been in the group of Republican candidates at this point. But the average taxpayer, one, knows Trump, and number two, can see some direct connection with political prosecutions that are going on. This Hunter Biden uh, plea deal is just amazing. He pleads to two misdemeanors, the gun violation. He goes on probation, and they ignore the Burisma and the Chinese information, which is in the same investigation, by the way. So I think it's an attempt to just sort of put a package on it, wrap it up, put a bow, and think that it's over. It's not.
So
That leads me
definitely,
to
so definitely,
go ahead.
whoever doesn't know about the politics, this is gonna be in favor of Donald Trump, because everybody, whoever who doesn't know very well about politics, is gonna always gonna see Donald Trump, Donald Trump, Donald Trump.
President Johnson had a famous saying, and he
They
said,
spelled my name wrong.
all yeah, all news is good, bad and good, as long as they spell my name right. And Trump is going to be out there dominating the airwaves on both sides of the political aisle. I mean, just look at what's happening. I mean, it's really going to be hard to overcome that momentum of name ID, at least. Now, the positive factor, and whether you're going to vote for him in a Republican primary, he's between 50 and 60 right now. And so that's the one that we'll have to measure going into next year. But I don't think any further indictment in Georgia or the trial is going to diminish that momentum or that name ID at this point.
Um, Merrick Garland was a nominee for the Supreme Court of the United States. Is that correct, Vidal?
He was at the end of the Obama administration, and Mitch McConnell did not let it come forward to the Senate.
So, do you think Merrick Garland has an axe to grind with Republicans? And is he behind the Civil War escalation?
I think it started before him with Eric Holder as the Attorney General. I think he's just continued it, and of course he's got a grudge. Here's a man at the top of any lawyer's career would be to serve on the United States Supreme Court. You become so important, so much a piece of history, and the fabric of the entire legal system of the longest democracy in the world. So, yes, of course, he's disappointed about that, and he needs to stay off TV at this, in my opinion. Every time he says that this was a fair process, that the Hunter Biden had no influence and he didn't talk to, you know, this is just I mean, of course they knew what was going on when they say very specifically, "Well, we didn't talk about it." What do you mean you didn't talk about it? Did your number two talk about it? Did you know what was happening? Of course they did, and so did the White House. So when they say they had nothing to do with it, that's probably false.
Unbelievable. Here's, I think, the risks. The Democrats are all excited about the indictments that they've been able to obtain so far. By the way, it's all Democrats that are indicting him, whether it's Merrick Garland or whether it's in Manhattan. But the point is, I think the risk in the general election, assuming that President or former President Trump gets the nomination, is going to be the economy. And I've said, regardless of the indictments, he'll announce his innocence all the way through the primary, through the general election. But the risk to the Biden administration will be the economy. And I've said before, all Trump has to do is to say to the American people, look straight in the camera and ask that question Ronald Reagan asked: "Are you better off today than you were 4 years ago?" You agree or disagree with that?
I agree with that. I think the economy is going to be a big issue, and following right behind him is going to be the decay of American cities that went woke. The people that defunded police. You have crime waves going on, including in Houston. They say crime is down, but not really. When you start looking at it, they're doing it on a percentage basis instead of the actual number of crimes. So you start going to Portland, Oregon, or San Francisco, or Los Angeles, and you see everyone pulling out of downtown. You see what's going on. America will pay attention to this and say, that's enough.
One more question, Vidal, and then I'll let Andrea ask the final question. And that is, um, this whole thing. I mean, do you see it? The middle America is the one that's going to decide, right? Because I think you have 40% of the population is liberal, 40% of them is conservative. How do you think the middle sees this? The general election, assuming Trump wins the nomination.
I believe, people vote with their pocketbook. Every political consultant will tell you that when the economy's bad, they're going to vote with their pocketbook. Even James Carville said it's the economy, stupid. So I think middle America, which I call it the left coast and the East Coast. And so I think that the coasts will vote Democrat, and the middle of America will show up and vote on the economy and vote on crime and vote on the future of our country. And I think they'll also see that this politicization of our law enforcement and our judicial system needs to stop.
One other issue, and I think Biden has created this for himself. As you know, he has stopped Anwar drilling. He has stopped the lease sales in the Gulf offshore for oil and gas production. He has stopped the XL pipeline. He essentially has frozen the fossil fuel exploration, which, as we all know, Vidal, we have enough fuel in Texas to supply the entire world and drive fuel costs down to about $1.30 a gallon, as we did during the Trump administration, because we were producing here in the United States. And what's happened is he's turned it back over to the oil cartels, right? The Saudis, who have now formed an alliance with the Chinese and the Russians. A couple of things have happened. Number one, the price of fossil fuel, the price of a barrel of oil has increased. That increase in revenue creates more money for Russia. China is now becoming one of the world's largest refiners. And now America is having to go back and purchase its fuel from the Saudis. He could Biden now does not have time to fire up the refineries, fire up pipelines, and fire up exploration. There's just not enough time. But do you think he's hurt himself? Because I think the price of fuel has driven inflation up in this country.
Well, that's where it hits most taxpayers first and voters is at the gas pump, and they're caught now in this mindless effort to move everything towards electric vehicles, and they're caught with this Chinese diplomacy right now. China makes the majority of the components that go into electric vehicles. How are you going to solve that? China will have actually a grip on US foreign policy when they turn around and start just rationing the batteries that are needed. There's already a shortage right now. There's not enough battery capacity that can come here to even change in the next 5 years significantly. And at the same time, you can't. Fossil fuels are going to be around for the rest of our lives, and they're dependent, they're efficient, and they move the country at this point. And this push towards green, the green world and EVs is now caught in this vice because the supply chain has evaporated on them. So let's see how they handle this. And of course, their energy policy, that this is a chicken come home to roost now at this point, and voters are going to see that at the pump next year.
Vidal, call to action. What we can do, like majority of people, they don't have the knowledge that you and Orlando have. So, how do we gonna make a right decision? As the regular voters.
Sit back. Don't make up your minds too early. Wait till you get enough information and see where it is. And then when you see something, believe it. Okay? If you see something that looks foolish or looks like a lie or looks like an exaggeration, trust your instincts on that and move forward. I don't see how the Biden administration and the Democrats are going to make a case that they should have another 4 years in place. And so, if you're a voter right now, take a look. Don't jump in there. Don't just give up on Trump. Don't give up on anybody at this point. Listen, and then call your instincts. Call up your head and your heart, and try to figure out what's going on. And wait until the spring as everything happens, and you'll get more information. And pay attention, because this is going to be a wild ride going into the next 18 months.
All right,
Thank
Vidal,
you,
thank you
Vidal.
so much.
You're welcome. Great to see both of you.
Appreciate your time.
You're
Thank you,
welcome.
thank you. And
All
we're
right,
gonna
Andrea,
bring him
back to
back
you.
later. I mean, in another time, because this is, as he said, it's gonna be a 18 very tough months in politics. With everything that is going on. So, Orlando, you and Vidal were talking about economy. People will decide on in elections because of the pocket. What it hurt me the first, is my pocket, is the economy. And talking about economy, well, Texas economy keeps growing. And also, we're seeing a lot of people moving to Houston, moving to Dallas, moving to all over Texas from other states that they're not in as good shape in economy as we are. So that's why we invite Leo Vasquez. He is the chair of Texas Department of Housing and Community Affairs to talk about the what is going on in houses and housing, the growing on that department in Texas. We're still building. We see houses, everybody, and the prices of the rent keep growing and it's more expensive. Also, the interest rate when you go and buy a house or a home, it's still up. So we want your insight, Leo, and tell us about what is the situation right now and what do we expect not only the rest of the 2023 and the 2024, knowing that everything has to do with politics and everything variate depends on what is the situation in politics. So welcome to TLC.
Great. Thanks for having me on again. Actually, this topic, I think, feeds really nicely on after your previous conversation. Uh, the macroeconomic policies that are going on in the United States that come from the top, come from Washington, are truly having effects on the ground here in Texas. And when it comes to housing, you just named a couple of items. The interest rates environment that's going on right now is just making it so unaffordable, not only to purchase a house, but even before that, to get the construction finance to build homes and apartments and condos and such. So also in Texas and across the country, we have such a shortage of affordable housing options, and these macroeconomic policies are really hurting the supply on getting that. We also have so many people moving into Texas because, relatively speaking, we are still a much more affordable place to live than again all that we all hear about the moves from California to Texas. That's being compounded also by all of the immigration across the southern border. Um, where are these people going to live? We already have a shortage on as I said, on the affordable side. I just don't understand how there is no policy, there's no plan on housing these folks.
Are you explain to us how the Texas Department of Housing works? In other words, you provide financial assistance to developers that commit to a certain number of inventory being set aside for low income folks.
Yes, the main program is actually a federal program, the Low Income Housing Tax Credit program. Uh, the This program gives developers a tax discount, which they can then sell to investors, to banks and investment firms, to give them a tax credit that they need. Every year, we have a competitive program for what's called 9% tax credits for developers, and then there's a separate but related program for 4% tax credits. In the state of Texas, we issue annually about $90 million worth of tax credits each cycle, each year. And actually, at the end of this month, we're going, or end of next month, we're going to actually be making those final awards for the year. But those tax credits, and say they're typically $1.5 million of tax credits for development. That's a 10-year credit, so it multiplies itself. So it's really a $15 million tax credit over 10 years. And that becomes an integral part of the financing for some of these affordable housing projects. You'll have the equity investment, you have the bank, regular finance, you'll have the tax credits. Oftentimes, there's a city or county or local jurisdiction that has some money that they'll put into a project, and that's how you can keep the cost structure down and get these affordable housing units built.
Some cities like Houston, I'm sure about Austin and San Antonio, Dallas, El Paso, other major cities, but Houston, as has been reported in the media, has some real serious issues with how funds are used for a low income housing. Um, do you folks have an investigative unit, or do you rely on the attorney general? You're just a grant authorizing, reviewing submissions and granting those tax credits. So you guys, do you get involved in any potential fraudulent activity that may be happening in, let's say, Houston?
Yeah, well, the Texas Department of Housing and Community Affairs, we actually do the follow up certifications, and we look at the ongoing reports. A developer cannot just say, I'm going to have 80% of my units for reserved for affordable housing, and then not actually follow through with that. So we follow through on that kind of reporting. So there is an investigative aspect of that. The problem that I think you're alluding to, especially, well, we've seen a lot here in the city of Houston, there's been a questionable activity relating to how they award their investments, their funding that they put into projects. At the state level, it's a very detailed, transparent scoring system, and the top applications who score the best will get the allocation of the credits. Historically, in the city of Houston, there's been issues where the their kind of equivalent housing and community development department has scored projects, 1 through 15 or what have you, and recommended the top 3 or 4 scores for the awards, and then the mayor has overridden that recommendation and taken the lower scoring projects. That's that's a problem. I mean, again, you have to have that kind of transparency, which the city of Houston has not always done. Um, there's another related aspect that was very big in this year's legislative session regarding the tax exemption of certain properties. Uh, there's a there was a loophole. It's too detailed to go into about public facility corporations that were taking projects off the tax rolls by them becoming investors. And again, if you're doing it in your own jurisdiction, that's fine. The groups in Texas were doing it outside of their jurisdiction. So, a little municipal utility district outside of Austin was partnering theoretically or technically on a development here in Houston, and that took the Houston project off the books, and that's like a $30 million, $40 million, apartment complex. That's not transparent. That's not the spirit of the project, and I think the legislature has fixed those loopholes now.
Has that bill been signed by the governor?
Yeah, I believe it has. Yes.
Okay.
So that
So,
again,
Leo,
that's
what has been the biggest challenge for the people that can apply to these grants or this help from the housing?
well again. This is getting back to that the macroeconomic policies that are coming down from Washington are just killing the efforts of developers. And really, part of it is the supply chain. When you have these policies to pull back on economic development and make it expensive and such, the builders, and these are not just affordable housing developers. I've also spoken to some big corporate market rate developers. They all are having problems with the supply chain, from the wood providers to the plumbing fixtures to the uh, the appliances and such that they're putting in the units. They can't get enough of them because the supply chain is so bad that they've discouraged the economic policies, have discouraged investment and discouraged hiring, and it's just all these little pieces keep adding up, and you can't get you can't get a project finished. You can't get it completed in the times that, and the department TDHCA has been having to grant extensions that in prior years we never had to do because it was easy, the supply chain was there. That's just not the case nowadays.
So you think
You
COVID
know,
has a lot to do with that, of course?
Well, it did, but again, it's the policies under the Trump administration were a whole different. I mean, it was so pro business and lowering the costs of doing business, lowering the regulations. That actually helped maintain this full supply chain. All that's just been cut off now under the Biden policies with the high interest rate environment, and I think more regulation. Texas at least is a little bit better on overall about lowering the regulatory hurdles. Um, but again, all these pieces add up, make it more difficult to build any kind of housing units. On the higher end, now they can afford to pay the extra amount. Again, it's basic supply and demand. When the supply is dropping, that's going to cost every unit to go up. Uh, on the high end, you can afford to do that and pass along the costs. On the more affordable end, more economical end. There's just not room to absorb that cost and feed it through to the end user.
Yeah, and
I
that's happening across the western states. There not only is there a labor shortage, but it's also the supply chain, as you mentioned, which is driving up the costs. And as Leo mentions, wealthy people don't have a problem. The ceiling fan that you wanted, is out of stock. Well, they can FedEx it in, or you know DHL it in because they can afford the extra $2,000 to get it in. But the average homeowner doesn't. And what's happening in many areas, Houston is fortunate because one of the benefits of illegal immigration, as you know, is cheap labor, which is something that America has relied on for a long, long time. But there are areas in this country where the illegal population hasn't quite made it there. And the average cost of a house is about $800,000. I don't think that the average family can afford a mortgage of 800,000. So that's what's leading to this housing crisis that we see not only in Texas but also it's creating homelessness. People are living in parking lots at Walmarts, Targets, behind Home Depot. They're now taking over public parks and living in tents. So not only is alcoholism, mental health issues, but now the economy is driving people into homelessness. Is that how you see it, Leo?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean it's a compounding effect that we started out with a shortage of affordable housing. It's just become so much more expensive, and again, we can't build enough fast enough to make up for that gap. We're going to keep losing ground, and then people are going to end up, oh, underhoused at the very least, and then homeless at the worst case.
Yeah, it's a
So
bad
we'll come
situation.
back to the same topic. I mean, people blame COVID for everything, but they don't understand that it's also the administration, the current administration that we're living under right now, that is bringing us or is taking us to this situation that we're living right now.
Yes, and even then, we have through the TDHCA, we distributed monies that came from all the federal programs, the American Rescue Plan, and we distributed about $2 billion in rental assistance for, again, people renting apartments, renting homes. We're currently in the midst of another related type of project on homeowner assistance fund, where it's almost $1 billion that we are distributing. This is still remnants of the COVID issues, but at a certain point, that's you can't keep pointing back to COVID as being the cause of this. Again, the underlying issue is the economic policies, the economic development.
And I think the dogs agree with that too.
If
Leo,
they're long,
a lot of folks forget that Leo not only he's been serving in state boards and agencies for quite some time, but he was also elected as the Harris County Tax Assessor Collector. Um, Switching gears, Leo, are you pleased to see what the legislature did with respects to property taxes in the state of Texas? Or is it just a lot of window dressing? In other words, as the state puts caps on there and limits and increases the deductions for the elderly and gives rebates, is this window dressing? In other words, does the Harris County Appraisal District and the Bexar County Appraisal District and the Dallas County Appraisal District just keep jacking up the value of the houses, the properties?
well, I wouldn't be as negative as characterizing it as window dressing. I mean, every step forward helps. I mean, every bit of extra deduction helps. The problem is, the fundamental issue is no one in Texas fundamentally owns their property. We are renting
Right.
our property from the state, because if you don't pay that rent in the form of property taxes, they're going to take it away from you eventually. Um, there are movements to move Texas out of a system reliant on property taxes and finding other ways to fund things. Heck, if our oil and gas production was up as high as it could be, if we were funding the supplying the world, at least the nation, we'd have so much more revenue coming in there and so much more tax revenue. The Texas has. I mean, we had what our $30 billion plus surplus. That's helping. That's allowing us to provide more property tax relief. People have to also remember, even if you are renting your property, part of your rent is going to pay property taxes that the owner of the complex has. So no one is really immune to these property taxes. Um, Again, every bit of deduction, every bit of raising the the limits on how much you can reduce the value of your home. Uh, that's important. It needs to be done for businesses as well. Uh, Again, it just cutting the expenses helps build more money back into the economy that you can reinvest.
At one time, California, I think of all places, had actually had a proposition on the ballot that said when you purchase your home, that let's just assume that Leo Vasquez is selling his house and Orlando Sanchez buys the house in June of 2023, and that house transaction was $280,000. That was the fair market value of that house, and that fair market value would be frozen at that level from an assessment perspective as long as Orlando Sanchez maintains a homestead on that house. And then let's say in 15 years, Orlando Sanchez sells it to Andrea Gomez for $390,000. The value for assessment purposes in 15 years would be $390,000. Uh, has anybody thought about that in Texas? Because quite frankly, we have a punishing sales tax and a punishing property tax rate in Texas.
And those types of ideas have been put forth, and that would also obviate the need for appraisal districts. I mean, it's at least the extensive size of the appraisal districts. The alternative, though, we have to think. You mentioned sales tax. We still need to have some sort of funding of the Texas state government. So if we get rid of or reduce property taxes, that is going to cause it has to be offset somewhere else. That will have to be a well. I'm sure there are other innovative ideas out there, but the most obvious is to raise the sales tax amount. I've heard some crazy figures about how much we theoretically would have to raise the sales tax. But again, that you'd be saving on the other end on the property taxes, and you'd actually truly own your home or business, your real estate. So there are different benefits, there are different ideas on how to do that. Again, some of the just volume of activity and business, like going back to the oil and gas, that can generate so much more income just leaving it at the same rate. As long as you're producing more, you're going to bring in more. That could offset the property tax rates that are going on right now.
Let me tell you why I'm a big fan of the proposal. Number one, politicians too often get to hide behind appraisal districts. They just shrug their shoulders. They say, it's not my fault. I didn't raise the tax rate. You're still getting charged, $1.27 per $100 valuation, as HISD does. So they can all say we don't, we haven't increased taxes in decades. Yeah, but the assessments that the appraisal district has levied upon your house, not levied, but assessed your house at,
Sure.
keep on increasing. So politicians get to hide. Here's the beauty about a sales tax. We have 8.25%, I think, in Houston, but you can't hide behind that. A politician, either in Austin or Houston, is going to have to decide the painful process of saying, okay, we're going to raise the tax rate to 17%, the sales tax rate. And I think that really puts pressure on politicians to make sure that the fiscal operations of government are efficient. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, that definitely is the case on how things work now. One of the arguments is that if we have a high sales tax, that will impact the poorer side of the economic spectrum because they'd have to be paying taxes, these sales taxes on a real time basis. We can exempt food products and medicines and things like that so that it would not impact those who have those essential needs that they still need to fulfill and pay for. But when you look at the sales tax rates, people in major metro areas like in Houston, what it's about 3.5 to 4%. I've actually been working on a project recently in Paris, Texas, where the property tax rates are literally half of the Harris County rates. I mean, the total rates, it's just amazing. So when you're not spending on all these unnecessary government programs or arguably unnecessary government programs, you could actually lower those tax rates considerably. Um, again, people and our leaders need to be looking more at what is truly necessary and adjust the tax income appropriately.
Well, that reminds me of Harris County. Just to remind everybody, Leo served as tax assessor collector of Harris County. I served as county treasurer. We both worked together at the time. But this is the problem with creating a new stream of revenue for government. I remember years ago, they proposed the building of the Harris County toll road system, and said, once the roads are paid, the toll goes away. The tolls never go away. They've continued to increase to the point that not only have we paid off the debt of the original infrastructure, but now it's a significant cash cow for Harris County. But is Harris County interested in saving money and being more efficient? The answer is no. They're tripping all over themselves. Those commissioners are trying to figure out the quickest way to give away and spend that toll road money frivolously. They could either substantially reduce the toll road costs, tolls, or eliminate them altogether. But this is the problem with giving government a new stream of revenue. Do you agree or disagree with that, Leo?
Absolutely, absolutely agree. I mean, once a pilot program starts up and you hire all the government hires all this infrastructure to maintain it, and they say it's going to be a 5-year program, a 3-year program, whatever it is, it's almost impossible to unwind that type of program. Um, Again, I think that's why taxpayers need to be vigilant on looking at these types of new programs, expanded programs. Some of them sound really nice. Some of them are needed, but perhaps it's not the government, a pre-K programs or something like that. That's great. We're all in favor of pre-K programs, but let's look to the private sector. Let's look to private foundations and such to help drive those forward rather than giving more money to the government to put in new programs that's going to just have to keep building and building over time, and then you'll never
By
reduce
the
the
way,
budget.
are you one of the families notified yet by Harris County commissioners that you will be receiving $500 a month for the foreseeable future?
And unfortunately, I have not received that
I
notice
don't
yet.
think we
I'm
none of us
anticipating it
will
anytime.
receive that.
Anticipating it anytime.
Okay, Leo. Well, call to action. What we can tell our viewers or whoever wants to benefit from the programs on the housing.
Yeah, I encourage everyone to actually go to the Texas Department of Housing and Community Affairs webpage. There is lots of different information on the different programs. There are so many support organizations and throughout the state. In Harris County, especially, there's also different organizations like the Baker Ripley organization and New Hope Housing that can give a lot more background. United Way has different programs and information. Um, Again, just don't be afraid to ask for help. Don't be afraid to look for help. There's lots of it out there. And then finally, as we've been discussing, encourage your elected officials, your state representatives, and again, these are Democrat and Republican. I mean, just make sure they understand that you're paying attention. You want property tax relief. You want to limit the expenditures of government. You want to keep them focused on what are truly those basic needs of infrastructure and safety and such and education.
Great. Well, Leo, thank you
Leo, we want to
so
thank you for
much.
your time. Yeah, and also your service to the state of Texas. I might remind everybody that's watching is that Leo has a huge salary for his service to the citizens of the state of Texas, which I'm kidding. It's one of those jobs that he does because he's qualified, number one, and number two, because he's passionate about the state of Texas. There's no compensation, maybe some out of pocket expenses, but other than that, they serve the public. So thank you, Leo, for taking time to be on the program and educating us about what the agency does and for your service to the taxpayers and voters of the state of Texas.
Great. Thanks for having me, and thanks for everything TLC does.
Thank you so much, Leo. Well, Orlando, looking forward to see you back in this beautiful weather in Texas, especially in
Yeah, I can't
Houston.
wait. Right. So thanks for tuning in. Thank you for watching, everyone. Remember, go to our website, TexasLatinoConservatives.com. Make a donation. We have Leadership Latino coming up. Everything you want to know about the organization and our nonprofit is on the web. Andrea, I'll toss it back to you. See you guys next week.
Thank you, Orlando, and thank you everybody for watching us today. And stay tuned every Wednesday at TLC Live, every Wednesday at 11 in the morning. And as Orlando said, please visit us in TexasLatinoConservatives.com, TexasLatinoConservatives.com. Become a member, make your donation, and also we have Leadership Latino coming up in August. All the information is in our website. Nos vemos el próximo miércoles. Chao, chao.